Today, I'm going to take you on a journey into the inner earth. When I began my publication, The Source, in 1980, I really immersed myself into inner earth topics. It was almost exclusively that for several years. And then I moved out of it and started going into other directions. But the reason I did that was because I was experiencing a lot of what I now know to be remote viewing journeys into that holosphere, into the civilizations there. And they were very profound for me, and I felt guided strongly to share them. I think that for whatever reason, my soul needed to delve into that at that time for my own experience and personal growth, maybe to prepare me for the work I was to do and was doing, and in this realm of what Thoth calls source translation. But for whatever reason, it was an incredible time for me, and I shared it through my publication. So I want to read you about the Shamagicians of the inner earth, and along with my commentary from my perspective now on it. But before I begin that, I'm going to read you a little bit about what I've written in regard to the science of the inner earth, what it really is about from the perspective, of course, of my Thothic impressions. I've never read anywhere else anything like this in regard to the actual science, but perhaps someone else has it out there and I just haven't read it. So I will begin here. There are many myths and legends attendant to a belief by some through the centuries that the earth contains a natural hollow at its center, and that in this hollow exists another world domain, populated with human or human-like beings living in a utopian fashion. The vision of the legendary Shambhala is one such version of this concept. It was widely publicized through esoteric circles in the past that Animal Bird briefly flew into the rim of the inner earth portal at the South Pole in the early part of the 20th century. It was said that he filmed what he saw from the aircraft, a lush vegetation with what appeared to be mammoths grazing on the flora. This silent and very primitive film was shown in theaters around the United States for a short period before the U.S. government put a stop to it. A few people who saw the film at that time were interviewed in the 1950s before their deaths. Whether or not all this actually happened, I do not know. It is interesting that the Hyperborean civilizations Thoth talks about are in the North Pole, and he's not really mentioned the South Pole. But recently I said, well, there's so much going on now with the South Pole. We're seeing these giant pyramids coming out of the snow because the snow is melting on both poles. And there's all kinds of things going on there, and there's reportedly secret military installations. Different stories come out. So I asked him about that, and he said, yes, indeed, ancient civilizations were at the South Pole. The Hyperboreans happen to come from the North Pole, but was a lot going on, really very, very far back in time. And a lot of the Sunbow clan that were he calls the master builders, or out of them came the master builders, that created the geodesic markers and for many of the ancient monoliths of our day, and built most of the original ones. The original, I stress that, because they were remanufactured later by other ancients when the original ones perhaps were not as viable. In some instances, they still stand from the original versions. But in any case, at the South Pole was a large colony of the Sunbow clan. So that's a whole other story that I'd like to get into, because he never really shared any of that with me in all these years. It was all about the North Pole and the Hyperboreans. So, but I thought I'd mention it just in brief here as we were talking about the the Admiral Byrd's flight over the South Pole and his entry into the opening there. There are natural openings at both poles, but I'll explain that in just a moment. A little over 30 years ago, I began to have my own experiences with the inner earth, or so I believed and still do. I experienced vivid tours of the interior in my mind, again, remote viewing, which certainly could have been my imagination. However, at the same time, I was also receiving cosmic sciences and other Akashic information that was being validated in many different ways. Several scientists, two of whom have been proteges of Einstein, and this is not Edgar Mitchell, these are two others, were quite interested in the science I was receiving. I mention this as since the inner earth experiences were happening concurrent with my adventures in science, it would seem to lend some credibility to the former. With all my writing, I mean, I have a lot of different things, and some of it sounds so fanciful and like, Lord of the Rings or David Spielberg or something. And I incidentally have never read Lord of the Rings, and I didn't see the movies till they came out way later, and I didn't even watch all of them. But some of them, you could say, oh, well, she's just a good story writer, and maybe that's true. But I stress that I was having a lot of scientific validation from Edgar Mitchell, from two individuals who weren't famous but were proteges of Einstein, and others who didn't poo-poo my science, and some of them, like Edgar Mitchell, actually studied it. The other two did not, although they read things that I'd written. So I say that because if that was real, the science, or had valid information within it, then you would suppose that at least some of what I was writing on these other topics were valid as well. I don't know why I can't talk today. I'm sorry. It's just one of those days. Anyway, it's interesting, though, because when Edgar Mitchell was saying my science was so valid and he wanted to study it and wanted to work with me on it and all of this, and he looked at I just told him, well, I'm also writing about Atlantis and Lemuria. He said, oh, well, that's not real. He didn't believe in Atlantis and Lemuria, not when he was that young man that was interviewing me and working with me. I have a feeling the elder Edgar Mitchell was more open-minded about those topics. But I always found that amusing because he was so sure that my science was on point, and yet he just totally dismissed Atlantis and Lemuria, like I was just fabricating that. Well, imagining it. And the other was true, But it stands to reason to me, anyway, that if one has validation, to some extent, the other would as well. It's all one package. So anyway, to continue on the subject. In 1980, I began a quarterly publication, which I titled The Source. It began as strictly on the inner earth, but after a few years expanded out from that, and in 1989 became Temple Doors, which proceeded into 1999. It is my desire with this inner earth addition to the Earth Chronicles section of Spirit Mythos, which is my now archived website, to introduce my Akashic perspective on the interior domain of this planet and its inhabitants. I stress, as I do with all of my work, that this is my perception, my personal insight into the Akashic of the earth. First, in order to understand what I am perceiving as inner earth, I present the following. According to my insights, we are constantly moving through not only space, but also time and dimension. When we pick up our fork or walk from the couch to the kitchen, we are changing our time in dimensional zones to some degree. This change for such a small movement is very, very little. We're talking about micro. Not being a mathematician, I am unable to give you the real fractions on it, but it is so minute as to effect only a slight adjustment in 1% of the rotation of an atom. However, as tiny as that might be, little can be profound when it comes to shifting perception and thus reality. When we travel from New York to Cairo, we create a greater time and dimensional shift. And I'm not addressing the change of established time zones. It is still minute, but it does affect our perceptions. I'm sure you have noticed this in taking long-distance journeys, but perhaps thought it was only jet lag and adjusting to another cultural lifestyle around you. Certainly, these are contributing factors, but according to my understanding, these additional factors are actually distracting you from the true impact the time-dimensional shift is having on your biological system. Astronauts experience this with even greater impact, especially in the days of the moon trips. Now let us look at a journey to the hollow earth of this planet with the same perception. The north and south poles of the planet form a vortex portal to the interior. However, this vortex is highly magnetic and warped at the poles of the earth and not suited for a simple stroll through the door, so to speak. Markers by surface Earth explorers have been placed at the exact point of north and south in these regions, proclaiming these points as the actual poles. Yet from my view of things, our whole planet, our whole universe, and all its spheres are whirls, W-H-O-R-L-S, of energy interacting in various rotations and alignments to form what we experience as solid matter. In this context, of course, that is verifiable by scientists. They all say, it's little tiny dots, particles, it's not really solid like we think of it. But Thoth views it more as a whirl. In this context, the highly magnetic poles warp the energies of our planet along the central axis of the magnetic shell we choose to experience as matter. When we walk or fly over the magnetic poles of our planet, we are really just going around the edges of the magnetic vortex. In order to enter it, we must catch the wave just right. We must catch the wave just right, as Admiral Byrd may have inadvertently done in the early 20th century. Since I wrote this, I believe that I did check or receive information from Thoth that indeed he did experience some dimension of the inner earth in his travel. What happens if we do? Suppose you are flying in a plane near the lip of the vortex and you find a thread into that opening. Obviously, the odds of doing this accidentally are slim, but apparently, if the bird story is true, and Thoth now says it is, not non-existent. What greets you? Munching mastodons? Not necessarily. First of all, just moving inside the lip of the vortex does not place you into the hollow earth. At this very outer region of entry, you would experience, as I believe Byrd might have done, a moving field of space-time through which you could see and experience either the past or the future of this planet. If you knew how to follow the space-time thread through the lip of the vortex, as do ultra and interterrestrial Merkaba vehicles, you would have eventually moved through the warp zone and into the hollow earth. Here you would find a world that is still slightly removed dimensionally from our own, as it is not only a greater distance from the couch to the kitchen, but it is also a much denser and more active magnetic zone, or zones within zones, which amps the whole space-time dimensional shift. An interesting article on time anomalies on the Pravda website. Okay. Well, for some reason that is skipped, and I do not know why. I think it's because, let me just pause a moment and see what I'm looking at here. Whoops, sorry. Okay, well, that was actually a link to the website, so I clicked on it to see what happens. Well, there's nothing there now, because I wrote this, like 15 years ago. Well, probably longer than that. Anyway, so we don't have that, but I would have liked to have read it. To continue, there are other ways to reach the interior through caverns leading to partially natural, partially man-made tunnels, yet the same shift would take place for individuals making such a difficult journey. Without an inner earth guide, they would probably perish by cellular degeneration as they move through erratic magnetic zones. I believe that with help, there have been surface earth persons who have traveled this route to the interior successfully in the past. Now, bringing this up to date, and I don't have the website links or anything right now, but I've seen them. I've seen articles and whatever stating that scientists now are finding some really strange anomalies when they're testing and looking down into the interior with their sonographs or whatever they're using. And they are trying to interpret it in various ways, which I feel are incorrect or largely incorrect. Because the kind of magnetic fluxes that are within the inner earth would require very sensitive, highly developed technologically machines, computers, sensors to be able to detect it. And if they're detecting it from the surface of the earth, as they're beginning to do now, it would be distorted. It wouldn't come out the way it really is, because it's going through an interdimensional phasing, and it's just not going to give them, it's going to give them very, very mysterious information, but not accurate information. Now, there are technologies, of course, with the ultras and whatever, that have the technologies to map this, but we haven't gotten there yet. We're getting there. We're kind of, we're peeking inside the envelope, but that's about all. There are many cavern cities and communities on the way down, yet when the interior is reached, one is presented with a really incredibly beautiful and very diverse world. The dramatic diversity stems primarily from the various and strong magnetic anomalies caused by the interior sun at the inner world center, which contains a very specific pulsating magnetic field which affects the environment around it. This lends to the inner world the pseudo-qualities of the Earth rotating around its solar sun. There are also quite a lot of differences as well. One may go 5 miles from a dense, lush tropical forest and arrive quite suddenly, almost like walking through a wall, inside a topsy-turvy vortex of ice crystal skies over a barren permafrosted desert. Time-space dimension is very loose in the interior. There are regions that are moved so freely back and forth through time, they are not inhabited, except by those who specifically work with and in those time-threading zones. In conclusion, and I stress this, physically traveling into the interior goal let me try that again. In conclusion, I stress this, physically traveling to the inner earth as a goal in life is not something I wish to encourage. Being present in this world where we live is far more important. I have a lot of typos in here. I'm trying to sort through them. Being aware that many realms compose the one of earthly experience is my message with the whole of spirit mythos. This awareness may help individuals to realize that all these dimensions are also within them. There's no need to go outside the self to find what you are seeking. In fact, I do not believe it can be found that way. Being in the present moment is where they all come together for each of us and for the whole and for the world as a collective whole. But that doesn't mean that I'm ascribing to shutting your eyes and not exploring all of these things. Just realize where they're coming from, that we're connected to all these realms, and you don't have to physically try to, find a way into the interior of the earth. Some people are really set on that. That's why I mentioned that. You can go there a lot of different ways because it's really all within you. That's the basic message. So that is that preamble, and it is a very basic preamble. I think I'll start reading to you other inner earth treatises as we go along in time. But right now, I'm going to go to the article on the Shamagicians. So this is where we begin this. The great medicine societies of the inner kingdom world define the word magic thusly. Its meaning is derived from the word magi, the divine Christ presence within the central sun. The letters M-A-G-I-C are cryptic keys locking in the cosmos or cosmic temple as recorded in the ancient Lemurian Melchizedek Book of Or. KYI'RA, relating the sacred table of light mathematics. Now you would say, what languages are they speaking in the interior? Well, they're speaking a lot of different languages. So we're looking at English when we're thinking of MAGIC, but you can also crypt this into into an Enochian text, all kinds of things, and come out with the same meanings that I'm speaking about here. In the cosmic temple, the first pillar is divined of fire and water, the one consuming, the other imbuing. As the two combine, the ether is conformed and the primary solids are fixed. To the subterranean initiate of the great medicine societies, magic is the first note in the teratary, T-E-R-A-T-A-R-Y, the progression of non-substance into substance in the creation, which is seen as continuous, of the planet Earth. Its association with magic, as the word is addressed in the surface esoterica, is remote. There is a basic generic tie, but the surface usage of magic as the occult black and, to some extent, white craft is a distortion of the conceptual magic of Earth's ancestors, which stems from the most ancient practices of the Melchizedekian order on and in the Earth. Certainly, the esoteric sleight-of-hand conductor of illusion is but a mimicry of symbolic doctrine. Now, in the first issues of the Source, I introduce people to what the inner Earth beings are all about. And so I'm just going to give you a really quick rundown so you'll understand it a little bit better. They are composed primarily of peoples who have migrated to the inner Earth from the surface Earth, from the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Indo-Europeans, all races and forms. At one time or another, some of them have been able to migrate into the inner Earth, and many of them were guided by beings that originated in the inner Earth, which are high Davic human forms. I say originated. Perhaps that's not entirely true as well, because some of the Davic beings had to mix with human genetics to have this human crossover. But they were more or less original inhabitants, let's just put it that way. But the others came later and migrated through. When we had the great floods and all kind of things going on, a lot of sources were open to them, doors were open to them, and they literally migrated through with guides who could bring them through the dimensional shift and into the interior of the world. So they bring with them cultural aspects of that, their languages, their memories of the surface Earth cultures, things of this nature. And sure, it's changed with time, but they also very much have libraries and things that hold to the original culture frame so they can understand them, research them, and continue their doctrines in certain ways. And now I'm going to come to a very long name. So I'm going to spell it because I don't think it is possible for me, especially not today, to pronounce it. Cadabra-Uethas, or Shamagicians. So we're going to use the word Shamagicians, are Central Earth illuminaries who have attained the highest degree of magic initiation or communication attunement with the Davic beings. These initiates are opened to the grand veil, V-A-L-E, interpreted also as the Great Way, the sacred passage, its most relevant posture being the energy symbol of the Holy Grail, the vessel for the ether drink or Christ blood, the wine of the valley, and depth of grace. Once the master initiate is opened to the grand veil, he or she becomes a living vessel for the Davic powers. The word illuminary in this context defines a physical being of a spiritually charged state so manifested to create a condition of illumination within the body beyond the average cosmogenetic inner earth inhabitant. And I would pause to say Thoth refers to himself as a lot of things, but mainly he refers to himself as an illuminary. A Shamagician is an illuminary of the nature focus, beyond the automatic enlightened scope of all illuminaries, a specialist in the field, in other words. It is a focus so accurate as to pass through the garden gate, or door between the human and nature kingdoms. All Central Earth inhabitants are taken into the initiations of the great medicine societies. And I've written about it. It says see issue 180 because I go through all that in that first issue. The societies themselves being under the guidance of the grand initiates or illuminaries. All illuminaries are gathered within the greatest order, the illumined. Yet the Shamagicians of the illumined order also maintain an order within the dominion of the Cosmorphia, the ruling Davic beings of the nature kingdom. Cosmorphia is a state or condition of existence encompassing and including these Davic entities. It is the essence rather than the flame. In the Cosmorphia, the definitives of mutable and immutable are suffused through the gauze of nature's webbing. Herein lies the field of magic consciousness. Magic is transformation and therefore alchemy. It is a register of hyperconscious action on the simplest of forms, imbuing their microstructures with the macrocosmic goal. A sip of the divine potion from the fairy's cup and the burrowing earthworm knows the flight of the eagle. Let me read that again. I kind of like it. See, I haven't read this in, 20 years or so, probably longer. A sip of the divine potion from the fairy's cup, and the burrowing earthworm knows the flight of the eagle. Never does the earthworm stop being an earthworm to become the eagle in this analogy. Spiritual magic never compromises the original form, but rather translates the potential of force within into a glorious realization, period. It is stated here that the form is not compromised, yet it does appear to change. In reality, it is the energy of the form that is fulfilling a potential aspect of itself. Since all is one, all beings are particles of I'm turning the page now, of the great whole. The Shamagician can realize any aspect of that greater self in nature he wishes. Because the Shamagicians have a great deal of primal power at their command, they cannot receive their status until they have passed through the grand veil. This passage ensures the illumined order that these knowledges, which are in keeping of the illumined, will not be wrongly solicited. There are those fallen sons of light who do use a facsimile of such powers for the de-evolution of spirit through distorted consciousness, but these dark magicians are not given sanction within the center of the earth. The power of the false magician is weak and limited to astral tricks of illusion. It can in no way be compared with the etheric brilliance of the true Shamagician. The shamanic, in that long word that I cannot pronounce, so we're going to say Shamagician, enters Cosmorphia for the purpose of gaining knowledge and oneness with nature, and this for the ultimate purpose of aiding the earth's consciousness as a whole. They never seek knowledge for the sake of power, but use power for the sake of knowledge, the tool of divine wisdom. Pause for a sip of water. Perhaps a sip from the fairy's cup. I wish. Once again, I find myself on a topic of such depth in the space allotted me in this issue. I can only hope to impart the basic concept and purpose therein. In an attempt to allow the reader insight into the Shamagician and his/her nature emphasis, I ask you to visualize the following. In Subterranea, there is the Gothguana, Hall of the Shamagicians. Situated in the Valley of the Sun, this mysterious structure is at once evident as a receptacle for magical issue. Cast upon the ground, like a salamander bronzed in the flame, its clay walls are indented with leaf-like designs carved in the clay and seeded with miniature copper beads. From a distance, the glinting and flickering of the reflections in the sun are so fragmented and elusive as to give the onlooker the sense that imagination has taken hold and he is seeing not with the eyes, but with his own sense of beauty. Gondwana appears to be not built on a grand scale, for the rambling clay walls mold effortlessly up the valley's hillside with a natural and simple grace, coming to press against the mountain as a vine surrounds its wellspring in crushing embrace. But that one sees from the outside of this tapestry of earth, but what one sees from outside the tapestry of this earth is deceiving. The Hall of the Shamagicians is actually many hallways and chambers reaching inside the mountain itself. This is not an uncommon architecture of the Central Earth. Many temples in which isolation and the absorption of earth energies are required are tunneled into mountainside. Once through the clay portion of the complex, those allowed entrance must pass through something akin to the grand veil symbolically. Physically, it is a sheath of magnetic current, the frequency of which is refined beyond our surface earth knowledge. This sheath, or lesser veil, pours down in front of the doorway to the inner structure of Gondwana inside the mountain. If the one who attempts entrance at this juncture is not pure of heart in his or her intentions, the person's astrophysical chemistry will register this impurity to the vibration of his or her cellular atomic structure. In the vibration of his or her cellular atomic structure. This, in turn, when subjected to the lesser veil, will cause a jolt to that physical system, varying in severity upon the degree of disparity between the discordant vibration and the true vibrancy to which this magnetic sheath is polarized. So in other words, if you weren't thinking pure thoughts and you hit that current, you probably would not be going through. I don't think it would kill you, but it would set you back a bit. Once through the magnetic sheath, a master initiate of the Cosmorphia walks down a narrow hall that emits a faint light coming from the walls, floor, and ceiling as a glow reminiscent of fireflies, only constant and even in intensity throughout, created by a phosphorescent algae. Now, this phosphorescent algae tells me, well, even before the elders used to talk about it, is in all the true inner earth caverns, like the caverns leading up to the surface that are of the inner earth civilizations. Those people have this phosphorescent algae in them. I don't know what the others have. When I say others, I'm talking about certain de-evolved, strange kind of persons. And some of them are really not nice at all. And they do have little pockets, little hovels and cavern areas in the earth. I mean, the earth is a big place, right? And especially with all these dimensions. So I don't know what they do there. But in the true light functioning vistas of the cities of the inner earth, in the cavern areas, they use this algae. At the end of the hallway, in the innermost chamber of Gondwana, is the Pika, translated as the room of transformation. The room is shaped like a kiva, with a ceremonial hole at the center of the ceiling, replaced by a gem known as the golden jasmine, the size of an ostrich egg, and multifaceted to reflect whatever light is cast into it. Just a moment. Okay, apologies. That was a coughing spell. There is a huge windstorm going outside in gusts. It's perfectly still, and then it gusts, and it goes, and it comes, which is typical at certain times in this valley. And yet the sun is shining brightly. But it's causing my throat and my eyes to all clog up. However, I'm determined because I feel this is the time I want to read this to you. So we're going to start at the top of that paragraph again. The room is shaped like a kiva, with a ceremonial hole at the center of the ceiling, replaced by a gem known as the golden jasmine, the size of an ostrich egg, and multifaceted to reflect whatever light is cast into its prismatic depths. The walls, the floor, the ceiling of this chamber are of a type of powdery yellow sandstone. The walls are covered with a thin layer of a substance resembling cobwebs. This material is actually produced from a very large inner earth species of worm who creates this netting for the primary purpose of collecting energy from the source about it, such as the sun, wind, water, earth, and maintaining an energy charge within this webbing for its own sustenance and reproductive uses. I hope it doesn't have any issues. The especially amazing thing about this worm, the suka, is that it collects these energies within the membrane surrounding its body and subsequently transports the energies into the caves, where it then constructs the webs out of the transformed energy compounds within its body membrane. The web shimmers in the dark caverns, sustaining and nurturing the suka and its offspring. The Shamagicians often place these worms in their kivas to supply the nylon-thin transducers capable of responding to the Shamagician's energy system. Through this webbing, or Weka, W-E-E-K-A, the Shamagician can sustain his energy rituals for a longer period of time. I might add that the suka are not just overflowing in the cave, so you have worms crawling everywhere. Ugh. They're just, here and there. And these worms, Thoth was just showing them to me as I was reading this. They're really beautiful. They're more like little crystal things. And when they light up, then they're even prettier. They're not like regular earthworms or something. They're really quite beautiful. Distracted beneath the golden jasmine. Well, I have to talk about the golden jasmine for a moment. This is a crystal that Thoth used to talk to me a lot about. And it's a lithium crystal, and it's very specifically, you can only find it in the inner earth. Now, the lithium crystals are very different from the quartz crystals in what they do, in many ways. Not always, but in many ways. Some lithium crystals that we know of are tourmaline, lepidolite. I'm trying to think of some others. Those two that I can think of off the top of my head. But lithium is a very etheric energy system in it. So if you're working with a lithium crystal, you're going into fields in your own energy system that you can't actually access in most instances with a quartz crystal, unless it's been imbued in certain ways, and then you can. But the lithium crystal is just naturally that way. Okay, so back to directly beneath the golden jasmine, a magical design is painted on a large circle of alabaster, positioned like a flat plate on the floor, upon which the kada, I'm going to call them, the Shamagicians, kneels. The paint used for the design has been mixed with a substance polarized to a particular frequency through mental impression, much like holy oil having been blessed or polarized by a priest to imbue it with a Christed vibration. The substance in the paint is given a more neutral polarization, that of inducing physical molecules to relax their bonding. The presence in these paints is subtle, but becomes more reflective when arranged in the colors and design on the alabaster circle. I started to call it an alabaster jar, like Mary Magdalene. When the Shamagician causes, through a magical energizing process, the jasmine crystal to receive light, this light is prismed in an exact pattern down onto the magical circle, causing a space to exist between the crystal and the design, which is highly conducive to the transformation of the physical state, that of the kneeling Shamagician. In addition, most Shamagicians have tattoos which match the light prisming from the crystal, much like the synchronicity on a computer. Some of the master initiates who are embraced by the cosmorphia do not bear the tattoos. Those luminaries who carry the authority of a Shamagician, but who are also involved in other mediums, such as Thothraismus, do not choose to affix themselves to the cosmorphia by physical markings, for they must belong to many gates as well as this nature threshold. At this point in the transformation process, the Shamagician kneeling upon the magic circle has merely brought his body into a condition of malleability. He must now begin the actual transpolarity of his potential of force into the desired vector for transformation. Here the reader need be reminded that while the term transformation is used to describe this event, the true etheric form is never violated. The physical composition is temporarily rendered facile, and like a rubber band expands to encompass a particular aspect of the all, which is within each particle of all existence. As with a rubber band, the original form is always present and will eventually snap back into its relaxed posture. In ordinary ambulance on this physical plane, the object, i.e. the human body, is the traveler, and motion through space is the journey. In cosmorphia, these roles are reversed. The motion is the traveling messenger. No, let me say that again. The motion is the traveling message, and the object has become the journey. Okay, turning a page, sort of. As I've said before, these books are so old, even the photocopies of them, that they're like the Dead Sea Scrolls now, and having to turn them, it's like a lot of noise. As the messages are received by the object, so that object rearranges its space between particles accordingly. Exactly how the Shamagician fully accomplishes this phenomena, I'm not permitted to clarify. It is a secret of the craft. In fact, I don't know it at this moment. Yet through the skill and desire of spirit, so the Kada ascends to the summit of his mastery and entertains the presences the presences of holy devas. In the visualization presented here, our Shamagician is one of the Thunderbird sect, and thus his new form is that of a bird. This is not a transformation of the entire body in this instance, but only affects the arms and shoulders, which are now pinioned with long wings, appearing to grow from the tendons between the shoulder blades. While the arms are present to some extent beneath the wings, the elbow joints are modified for wing extension and flight, and the hands are absorbed into the wings. The Shamagician is now capable of flight. Now, what we're seeing here is a choice. He can become a whole bird, but he chooses just to have the wings. This is the amazing thing about this ability. And we have this ability to change these, forms and yet maintain our central axis while doing so. But why are they doing this? It's not for show. It's not for play. It's not, oh, let's go all fly with the birdies. It's for a process of integrating with the natural realm. And that would be a whole nother a whole nother writing or of understanding what that's all about. But I'm just trying, in this issue, I was just trying to show how this works, how they get into these forms. There are other forms of transformation in which the nature artist changes most of his life force into pure energy and focuses only a small portion of it into external viability through the image of a small animal, hawk, dove, deer, tortoise, etc. This borders on sheer illusion and can be maintained only for a brief time. Another means of entering the animal kingdom is to inhabit an already living creature, but this too can be done for but a short time and must be undertaken with the express permission of the guardian deva of the animal to be inhabited, which would also mean that the soli of that animal was in accord. The preferred transformation is one of partial alteration, as it can be sustained for a longer time, and of most importance because the Shamagician is not disguised. He is seen for what he is, a Kada in a state of transformation. While these master initiates are of the holy illumined order, they still contain a human force. The spiritual codes of the heritage of one, tribes of the Central Earth, decree that human beings should be seen and known as such. In a society where total transformations are possible, even if only by an elect few, those who are involved in such practices must announce themselves, giving their true identity to those whom they come in contact while in a transformed state. This is difficult for a Shamagician when he is in a concentrated energy form. He enters these states not for deception or exhibition, but to become one with that part of being, to learn and receive so that he may ultimately give. Thus, when a Cosmorphium master does enter a totally different form, he usually does so in retreat, away from the attention of other humans. Even the half-transformations enacted by the Thunderbird sect are preferably accomplished in solitude or in the company of others in the same state. The Thunderbird sect performs its patterns of flight in order to receive from the devas of the air. It is a means to know both worlds in one interaction. Pause for a sip of water again. In the interaction with the nature kingdom, the practice of Wulzadak, Wulzadak, or transformation into nature forms, is but one aspect of the whole. At the zenith of the nature communications and receipt is to be found the seat of spiritual alchemy, where Wulzadak is an experience of human into nature state. The higher art, Hatha, is the transformation of the human condition into the exalted state of greater essence, closer to the threshold of angelic issue. This is not meant to imply that Wulzadak is perceived by the illumined humanities in negative or improper practice. It is true in its true and purified genre, performed by illuminary Shamagicians. It is a holy practice, but its content is a more simplified force, primal and limited. Hatha embraces the Christed state as well as the greater degrees preceding it. Excuse me for clearing my throat, but this windstorm, which is invisible because it's so sunny outside, is kind of getting to me here. Of course, all the doors and windows are closed, but that means nothing in this little house. It got a lot of air places. Okay. At the pinnacle of spiritual alchemy is the grand initiate, Thoth Rasmus. I'm calling him Thoth Hermes here because I used to do that, although I do have in parentheses Rasmus. And now I would just say Thoth Ra, but, you know, he's a lot of different Thoths. Now, this is a quote. Thoth Hermes from the Secret Places of the Lion by George Hunt Williamson. So this is a quote from Mr. Williamson's book. In the apex of the pyramid, I set the crystal, sending the ray into the time-space, drawing the force out from the ether, far in a past time, lost in the space. The children of light looked down on the world, seeing the children of men in their bondage, bound by the force that came from beyond, knowing that only by freedom of bondage could man ever rise from earth to the sun. Down they descended and created bodies, taking the semblance of men, like and yet unlike the children of men. Man is a star bound to a body. Man is a space born, a child of the stars. Man is space born, child of the stars. Man is a flame bound to a mountain. Now, I believe, because Mr. Williamson was not stating that he was channeling things, that he probably got this from some old Egyptian text or something. But that's my summation. So to continue with my work, within the inner world, Thoth continues to work within the doctrines of spiritual alchemy, assisted by his communion with ultra beings, even more ultra than himself. Now, this is passages from various lessons in Hatha given to me by Thoth the Initiate. Earth is a sphere, energized concentric centers of consciousness. Let me I'll start over. Earth is a sphere of energized concentric centers of consciousness, each layer radiating a vibration of relativity to every other layer, expanding into the unity of the whole sphere and to the infinite rationales, advancing and regressing through dimension. Being is involved in expansion, contraction, impelling, repelling, motion, emotion, all quantum of the radiant flow. True illumined being is beyond the summit of evolution. The mind of being is the nothing, that which is without need, existing independent, yet causing interpenetration between all existing principles. When we speak of earth, we do so as a torch raised in a darkened cavern. Wherever we shine the light, so the initiate sees the signs on the wall of the cave. The initiate perceives only that portion visible to his sight at the moment. He cannot connect all the symbols together. Should the seeker have revealed to him the complete luminosity, he would not be able to comprehend or contain what he had witnessed, for his mind is magnetized for a slow rate of absorption. The initiate in all his nakedness is clothed in the raiment of the being of all constancy in which his flame arises. Turn page. All knowledge is inseparable in the knowing, but the many channels of thought form perspectives of assimilation which are active to the karmic groups within their own circumference of understanding. This is all necessary in the coming together of mankind's destiny, for in order to create unity, many smaller unifications must first take place, isolating the keys of wisdom from the mass rationale. The obstacle lies within the inability of these karmic groups to be flexible, to recognize the parity of all cosmic principle, wherein there is no one organized channel that is complete within itself. Once key knowledges have been isolated, they must migrate into the chain of wisdom which maintains universal sovereignty. Understand that the purpose of a chain is to link together and combine forms from single circles to create continuity and communication. However, the chain is dependent on the solidarity of the many circles which must remain strong unto themselves. The links of the chain must interpenetrate, but they must not lose individual form, lest the continuity of the whole be lost in the mass rationale. Each link is separate and golden. It is given its own reflection in the light. Yet together, as a chain of purpose, it is known that each link is given reflection by the same light. The chains of man bind the earth. The golden chain of cosmic consciousness is a forever expanding link into infinity. I'm just going from one set of quotations to another from Thoth, so we continue. Know that all passeth away but the divine accord. Discord is without regency. It dissipates in the four winds. Reveal thy hearth to the constancy of the flaming spirit, for it is whole in its birth and not an infant of the times. Thus among men cannot be reborn. Now, restart that again. Trust among men cannot be born whole until the day of the Lord is known in every acre of the homestead which man has made of earth. Unto each is given the seed of the Son of God and the seed of the daughters of men. From the faithful sowing of both shall the harvest proceed. Now, Thoth refers in the past, has referred on several occasions to the sons of God and the daughters of men. Now this term has a bad MO. We associate it with the Anunnaki invading, humanity and all of that. But it was not the original intent. The original writing about the sons of God and the daughters of men was not about the Anunnaki invading and raping women of the earth. It was about the ultra beings, the shepherds, as Thoth calls them, the lords of light, entering the earth, and through agreed consensus and agreed individual permission were these children created. Now, the Anunnaki saw a good thing and they decided to recreate it in their own way, which was not God's way, if you want to put it in a biblical sense. So that's why we have so much confusion between what the sons of light have done, sons and daughters of light, have done on this earth through total consensus, because they are our kindred and they respond to us in a loving, harmonious, consensual way. The Anunnaki did not do that. They were bad boys. And that's why Iniki came up out of their midst and said, hey, we're not doing this anymore. This ain't good. And he made some changes that were very valuable. Many think Thoth was Iniki, but he says he was not, although their souls have a kindred, he said. I don't know exactly what kind. He hasn't communicated with me on that. But in any case, Iniki was a pretty good guy, even though he came from the Anunnaki, and he helped set things straight. But we still have this problem of dividing out all this language, these biblical quotes. And right now on the planet, we have an Iniki crush. Everybody's thinking Iniki. Not Iniki, I'm sorry, Anunnaki. And this is just a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of the story. They came later. So did a lot of other guys. But the Anunnaki have become the rock stars. And, you know, I just don't care for that at all, as you can tell. Okay, so let's continue. Sorry about that. I had to readjust my headset. So let me take another drink of water. Ye of the land of men, see as the eagle flies, approach the sun of eternity on the wind of the golden dawn, and know that thy heritage of God, which speaks as the pure flame of truth to the tribes of the lost council, and know thy heritage, which speaks as truth. Every man seeth the day, but the dawn is hidden from him, for he seeth as a ship at sea, and not as the wind which guideth the masts of the ship below. I should have said the sails, I guess. The ages of God are vested within the ages of man. Yea, the two are clothed together in the blood of the sacred Christ. As man sleeps with the soothing rocking of the earth cradle, so God's time must seek his heart in the light of dreams, for man is a forgetful infant swathed in starlight and suckled by the ticking of celestial clocks. He has seen the beginning of time. He will forever span eternity, but he places himself between the sun and the earth, and there he contemplates his shadow. Within his mind is a faraway dream, a promise of truth, of reason, of love, an infinite calling of the mother light, a need to restore the child's grace. It is the divine dream in which man has lived and will live again. We go to another quote. When we speak of the actions of the stars and their influence upon the earth, and of those prophecies which unfold in your time and in the time of your generations upon the earth, we speak of two worlds, of two times, for there will come a division of the earth, so as there is now a division of day and night. There will reign glory in the world of the day, and fire in the world of night. And two worlds shall be given ages from the mouth of the body of man. A separate time shall be given unto each world, and a separate heaven above. It is not for us to lead the stallion of prophecy to the altar. Man is his own agency of spirit. He is the rider of the dawn and the darkness. The great and manifold presence of being which uplifts and restores constancy and grace to the universes of chaos is the only door through which man may pass. Until he accepts this truth, this day will not be graced with the understanding of his own destiny. For it is a maze of living to which his body is committed, and from which his spirit must rise to the calling of the homeward light. And of course here, and I believe I've actually recorded this passage before in something else recently. I don't know how I got to it, but I found it somewhere. In any case, this passage is probably at least one of the first times that Thoth mentions anything that is obviously talking about the newer star, leaving the old Earth behind, the ascension dynamics, moving into the new Earth. And of course, that terminology is not given here, but that's obviously to what he's addressing here. So I think we have completed let's see. I'm going to take, no, not quite through yet. I might have read this before, but it's a prayer that Thoth gave me. In the name of divine victory, I am wedded to the manifest destiny of my spirit in the earth. To this end, I cannot be conquered by votaries of evil service. In the name of divine light, my wellspring is in the sun of majesty. I am infused with the presence of the host in delivery and receipt, in all manner of sustenance and accord. In the name of divine perfection, my body and mind are splendid in glory, released from the transgressions of previous experience, whole in the evolution of consciousness. In the name of Elohim, I am the generation of my heritage, revealed in the sons and daughters of light. I am the quest of mine own homing, the birth of mine own fathers, forever unto the coming and the going forth. I am lifted, wings bound to the star of the homeward light. Amen. I may do a little prayer thingy for you all of that so you can get to it easily. And then we're going to quote here from Corinne Helene's Mystic Masonry and the Bible. In the cities of this day, in the cities of this new day, temples of initiation will arise in which the eternal truths taught in the mysteries will once again be revived in all their magnificent splendor. Initiation will again be recognized as an attainment by which man can, even here and now, overcome the powers of death and enter into a realization of life immortal. Now, I don't know exactly when she wrote this, but her books were written from the 1930s to the early 1950s, some period of time like that, I believe. Turning page. So to conclude, the Shamagicians of the Central Earth Heritage of One focus their energy forces through transformation into giant tortoises for a phase in their initiatory rites, which they enter once every 5,000 days, marked from the beginning of the individual Shamagician's first initiation. The tortoise is also venerated by sacred inscriptions placed on the backs of certain select of these ancient species. This is accomplished not by engraving, but through a process of light transfer, causing no mutilation of the shell. Now, from the book by Ferdinand somebody, Osinski, I don't know, something like that. I sound like Robin Williams. From the beasts, men, and gods. From beasts, men, and gods. This is a quote from his book. In Agarthi, that's in the inner earth, the learned Panditas write on tablets of stone all the science of our planet and of the other worlds. The Chinese learned Buddhist. The Chinese and Buddhists, I guess, know this. Their science is the highest and purest. Every century, 100 sages of China collect in the secret place on the shores by the sea, where from its depths come out 100 eternally living tortoises. On their shells, the Chinese write all the developments of the sacred sciences of the century. Well, obviously, you can't just write everything on a turtle shell or on a block of stone. So this is highly symbolic, I believe, but Thoth is stating that a certain light language imprint that represents the consciousness, the knowledge, the wisdom, is placed on the tortoise shell by this sacred inscription of light, which I imagine doesn't stay there forever, but it's some kind of a symbolic representation. And I would imagine the tortoises are involved willingly with that program of light. And perhaps this the quote from this book indicates that maybe the Chinese practice some similar symbol type of inscription as well. But it's a nice ending anyway. So I believe that concludes what I was going to read to you and discuss today. And I hope you have enjoyed it. And thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.